Good evening, everyone. Welcome to November's Dirigo Labs Speaker Series. It's great seeing everyone. For those who have not attended in the past, Dirigo Labs Speaker Series is a monthly event where founders and leaders share insights on how they overcame challenges, capitalized on their target market, and develop their products, providing you with actionable insight for your own products and processes. For more information, you can find us online at dirigolabs.org under our Speaker Series tab. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this evening's conversation. This free event is presented by Dirigo Labs and is sponsored by Valley Beverage, the Harold Alphon Institute for Business Innovation at Thomas College, and Brooks Co-working and Innovation Space. And this conversation is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel. This evening's conversation is presented by Sustaine with co-founder and CEO Malcolm Smith. In this speaker series, Malcolm will discuss how Sustaine's experts guide you through the process of optimizing your energy solutions, ensuring you access to the best offers through competitive bids from qualified providers. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. And if you're watching, you notice that I just spilled my sparkling water over here, so it's a good start. That's okay. We all make mistakes. I'd love to spend about 2 minutes telling you what Sustaine is, so we got a common ground. And then I want to ask you guys a bunch of questions because Sustaine is about energy and everybody uses electricity. So we're gonna have a little fun with that. I do want to talk to you about sort of the extraordinary tableau of incentives that are available now so that maybe they're valuable to you at your business or at your home. Maybe you can help spread the word because it's about getting incredible savings and clean energy at the same time now, which is really cool. That's the world we live in now. And then absolutely happy to tell you about the Sustaine story and we can swap war stories if you want. Like I'm very happy to do that. That's always fun. And you guys can ask me any questions you want anytime. I might even answer them. Feel free, please. So Sustaine is a software-based services company, and we help small to medium businesses get cheaper and cleaner energy. We do that through software that we wrote. So from a single energy bill from the customer, you can run it through our software. We have all the incentives, lots of complicated incentives throughout the country database. And then we also have a database of the utility tariffs, the way they charge for electricity. And so we can model each of the possible solutions that a customer can implement. And through some optimizations, we bring the best ones to the top. So for a small business, should you be doing a lighting project? Should you be doing a heating and cooling project? Should you be doing on-site solar? Should you be doing off-site solar storage? It gets really confusing. And then how are you going to finance it and all the different ways you can pay for it? It's this really complicated matrix of solutions. And we wrote software that simplifies that because small and medium businesses are actually lagging in adoption of renewables. So enterprises are adopting them because they're cheaper. People at home are adopting them because they're cleaner and sometimes cheaper. Small businesses are kind of stuck in the middle because they're busy all day running a business, don't have the expertise to figure it out, but still have to watch that bottom line carefully. So that's what our service does, is makes that really simple for them to know which way to go. And then if they, so we give them a menu, sort of a scorecard of how much they can save from these different solutions. And then we help them get each of those solutions in a rough sequence. So we don't provide any of the solutions that we recommend. We work with a network of installers or providers to provide those solutions. Sit on the customer side of the table and help them get a good solution at a good price through a competitive process. Also get access to a lot of these incentives that are out there and make sure that they do that. So sort of filling that gap in energy knowledge and energy capability that is common in small businesses. I often find myself talking to a room full of sort of energy wonks like me. It's an affectionate term. I don't know whether that's the case with you guys. So let me just start asking you some questions and hopefully we can have a little fun here and you can educate me on some things. And then we will talk about this tableau of incentives that's out there, which is very exciting after that. But so, okay, so we're gonna start with a really easy question. Who works for a company that pays an electric bill at work? Raise a hand. And who
Who has an electric bill at home that they pay? Who would like to pay less than they're paying now at work or at home? Yeah, that's
Because costs are up. Okay, so those are easy questions. So here's a little bit harder question. And this is there's no right or wrong answers here. I'm really just curious about whether your experience is good. So have any of you tried to do anything to reduce that bill, your electric bill, either at work or at home? What have you tried? What have you, I don't mean what have you solved? I just mean what have you have you looked? Have you asked? Have you inquired? Have you engaged? I'm curious about sort of your experiences. You're nodding your head. Have you done anything?
Yes, I have been, I have quoted rooftop solar,
Mhm.
for my house. I've done a LiDAR study. I know that I need about a 12 kilowatt system. But the only incentive that I could see for a residential homeowner was the federal credit.
Mhm.
Did you have research yourself? Or did you go to vendors to do
I
it?
did the research myself.
Mhm.
The vendor did share some information, but it wasn't anything that I didn't feel like I already knew.
Okay.
And I understand that there's a sliding scale credit for heat pumps based on income.
Mhm.
I'm curious how you found out this information. Where did you go when you started your search?
The internet.
You went to the internet, you went to a search engine?
Yeah, Google.
And do you remember what you were sort of looking for? Do you remember what you asked it, so to speak?
Incentives, I would have said,
Okay,
incentives for clean energy, Maine.
okay. Incentives, clean energy, Maine. Okay, great. Anybody else? Who else says? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I tried to get like an ROI out of the solar companies, so call them, I'm like, what's my payback period? And then I never could get like a great answer, and I'm just like, yeah, whatever. And then we tried doing it, we put a plan together for like development. So we had multi-family properties, like would be our energy company. And again, it's always hard to get an ROI out of the solar company.
Okay, so you went and found some experts or vendors, really.
Vendors, yeah.
How did you find them?
Yeah,
The internet? And you were looking for, what were you looking for? Do you remember what you were, literally search strings, if you remember them? I'm curious how you go about it.
probably solar name.
Okay. Okay. Great. So some similarities there. Anybody else?
So, well, you pointed out the raise your electric bill, but we moved from, in the commercial building here in Waterville, from the boilers, that was free to after, and we installed some heat pumps, trying to answer issues that tax and everything. So, hopefully, but we don't know, we're about to go through another winter to see if it's really, really cold, whatever will change, and like thousands, but like.
So you put in heat pumps yourself?
No,
They were there.
We went to local companies.
Yeah, okay. So you found people that could install the heat pumps.
Yeah, Brand, we did consultants, right, and, yeah, Brand. With energy consultant, didn't you have to buy to put in heat pumps?
Yeah,
But he-
Yeah,
so
we did
the
have-
consultant did it because we didn't
on a
know.
friendly basis,
Yeah.
he did, energy evaluation.
Okay, so you have a friend who's an energy person who did a sort of energy analysis
Right,
for you,
no.
and that led you in a direction, and then you went out and found vendors, or did he point you to vendors?
Yeah, I went to some vendors and I talked with efficiency Maine and all around.
Yeah, okay,
Our electric bills going up now,
yeah,
especially our home line. I opened up my electric bill the other day and it's over $300, which has never been before. And I feel like I'm paying for all those darn commercials for no one free.
another discussion, yeah, another discussion, Okay, that's really helpful. Quick footnote before I ask for one more experience, but, there's a lot of people are putting in heat pumps, and it's coinciding with a lot of pretty wild volatility in the price that CMP is charging, which is not all CMP's fault, but it's really not CMP's fault. But anyway, it can be very disorienting and confusing. So I'll stop there, but if you have follow-up or anything like that, I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more. Heat pumps in Maine do work, and they are a good idea, and they are more efficient. But a lot of it's sort of hidden at the moment because there's such craziness going on with electric rates. It's really confusing.
Yeah, so, heat pumps do efficiency natural gas boiler, to really get the cost down. My dad owns a pretty sizable plumbing and heating company that does geothermal
Okay.
heat pumps, those kind of things in southern Maine, so, they did the install. One thing I know about the heat pumps, like recently, is they just changed something in the law where if you have oil or gas coming into your house, you're no longer eligible for some of the heat pump credits, which is, I don't know much more about that, but I've heard this, like you have to be on wood pellets or something else for some of the federal credits now, which is, yeah, well, for me, but for the center of the country, if you're, and so I know that that's been something too.
Yeah. So in full disclosure, we specialize in small, medium business. So there's different rules for residential. I'm not aware of what you're talking about. But there are a lot of different incentives out there. So depending on what you're sort of tapping into, you're really challenging. So you had, it sounds like you had a trusted expert sort of in your father.
Yeah, so my father also just did the first like large scale solar install for a business in southern Maine, and now he's selling back to the grid twice what he was paying ever since he's done that in his business. So he does a lot of like heating up with whether it makes sense to do geothermal solar or natural gas or whatever the case.
So how many solutions does he sell? So he does heat pumps.
Heat pumps, Eastman, like high efficiency gas boilers. They do the oil stuff. There's a retail oil business, retail gas business. There's geothermal.
And now he's doing solar.
Doing some solar where it makes sense. They do insulation, like he does like the soy-based insulation stuff, which is have a good effects. A lot of different. I grew up doing home and heating stuff. So.
I'm seeing 2-3 years ago, the industry of providers of these solutions is very siloed. So people did heat pumps, people did solar, people did lighting project, And rarely did they ever cross boundaries. I'm seeing a little bit more of that now, where they're starting to cross some of those boundaries, which is interesting.
Well, one thing I noticed with the heat pumps, there's something to be aware of, is it like how you set your boiler kick-on rates and your heat pump rates, like whatever the temperature kick-ins are, that does have a big effect about which ones when it carries a load. And if you're not careful, like sometimes that heat pump, they're off on the wrong degree, right? All of a sudden that heat pump's running when it shouldn't have to run. And there's things like that too that I've noticed in our own house.
Yes, especially when you have two different systems, it can get pretty complicated. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else an experience they want to relate? Anybody have a bad experience? Anybody give up because it's too hard? So I say this sort of aphorism commonly. Electricity is not like anything else in our whole economy, and I'll demonstrate it to you. We buy gasoline by the gallon, and you all know what a gallon of gas costs. When I say 87, 89, 93, like you know what I'm talking about, we can have a conversation. We buy bread by the,
Loaf. Everybody knows what a loaf of bread is.
about what it costs. If it's Asiago cheese infused, you're gonna pay more, and you all know that. So who knows the unit of measure? What do we buy electricity by? You can't answer, Jordy. Kilowatt hour. That's right. The number one answer is kilowatt, which is actually not the right answer. Kilowatt hour is the correct answer. And about 20% of people know that. How much do you pay a kilowatt hour, roughly? Anybody know?
Cents.
Yeah, in Maine right now, it's about, depends which month we're in, but yeah, it's about 15 or 16 cents. Okay, about 10% of people know how much they pay per kilowatt hour. So when we start talking to them about how they can save electricity and how they can take charge of the electricity for their business, and they can't even spell KWH, that's a really hard conversation to have. And it's not anyone's fault. Okay, we made electricity a state regulated monopoly. It's illegal for me to run wires to your house and sell you electricity that I make. Okay? So there's nothing else like that we have. It's sort of like we've taken, citizens from the Soviet Union and told them to go out and shop for an apartment. They've never done that. It's always just been given to them. They have no idea where to start. And that's where a lot of us are around electricity, which is really weird. Okay, there's nothing else really like that we have, maybe water. Nobody's really shopping for water.
Although we're starting to sell it by the bottle now, so we're starting to pay attention to that, I guess.
So that makes for challenging conversations. So that's part of why I was sort of trying to draw out from your experiences. And I spent a lot of time doing that because when we get into conversations with small businesses about their energy bill and how they can pay less, we usually wind up getting a solution matched for them. About 1 in 4 of those conversations actually turns into some kind of a signed deal, a contract to get cheaper and cleaner energy in some way. The hard part is that very first part of the conversation, because I'm trying to relate to people on something that they don't really relate to very well. So I'm sort of I'm giving away the conclusion, but that's sort of why I love to talk to groups like this, is because I have so much to learn about where people are actually coming from. And if you think people that are running a business know a lot more than you do at home about electricity, I can tell you they generally don't. A few do, who have that kind of a background, but most of them really struggle to even understand how to engage around their power, their energy use. And so that's the challenge that Sustaine has. It's also part of the reason I think, and there are other climate-based reasons, but it's also part of the reason why the incentives that we have out there are so important and so needed. Okay, and so I'm not disagreeing with everything that everyone says about the climate reasons and climate change and trying to get to economies of scale. Those are all absolutely true. And those are great reasons for incentives to sort of prime the pump and get people going. But the other reason is that for 100 years plus, the government has had completely the opposite role of completely stymieing any kind of innovation in the energy sector, simply because of the regulated structure that we put in place, which does lots of things, unintended consequences. But one of them is that it causes the providers of energy to be very reluctant to take any risks. So you don't get innovation, you don't get newness. Now you've got all those things coming at once and nobody can talk about it. Okay, so that's why these incentives are really important. So I'll go through the small business incentives, and then I'm happy to answer questions that you have about those incentives or our business in general. I'm very happy to talk about Sustaine some of the other sort of pains and joys and progresses that we made. So for small businesses in Maine, there are 3 grant programs right now. The first one, and probably the least known, is these things called REAP, R-E-A-P grants from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. That stands for Rural Energy for America Program. Rural small businesses, so for profit. Rural is in Maine, anywhere except the Greater Portland area. Small is complicated, but a good guideline is under 500 employees or under $30 million in revenue. So that's small. And it needs to be a for-profit business. It's not a not-for-profit or a government agency. They can get REAP grants. A REAP grant is a competitive grant. It's funded to the tune nationally of $1 billion, basically over about 15 months. Okay, so that's a lot of money. The state of Maine is giving away, I shouldn't say that, is granting, is awarding grants to deserving recipients, $2 million every quarter for energy projects through these REAP grants. It's actually quite a bit of money, and they've had trouble giving it away in the past. Part of the reason it's hard is that the application is not easy. It's generally 100 pages, give or take 30. And so they've engaged with a few actors, one of whom is Sustaine. We're honored to be the recipients of a technical assistance grant, which some of you are probably familiar with. Technical assistance grant, tongue in cheek, I say, is it's so hard to apply for these grants. The government pays us to apply for you. Okay, so that's the world we live in, but that's how it works. So if you think you might qualify for a REAP grant, you're interested in an energy project, and I'm sorry, it's a clean energy project. So most of the things we've been talking about tonight would qualify. Energy efficiency, heat pump projects, as well as renewables, solar, cogeneration, storage. Most projects, if they reduce your energy consumption or your energy bill, they're going to qualify, they're going to be eligible for a REAP grant.
Does it require match?
Yes, the REAP grant is a reimbursement grant. So, so you have to be able to pay for the whole project, and you have to be able to show that you can pay for at least half the project. That can be through financing. So a term sheet from the bank is good enough. And it's either you check that box or you don't. So there's scoring of these applications. Match your ability to match the contribution it's a binary thing. Either you've got a term sheet from a bank that says yeah, or you've got a bank account that shows that you've got $35,000 and it's a $70,000 project. So it's not that hard to meet, but you do have to show it. And you do have to come up with, it's a reimbursement grant. So you have to in some way, you have to pay for the whole project. And then pretty soon after it's finished, within a month or two, you'll get your REAP grant back if you're awarded.
Are there any ranges on the sizes of the projects?
Yeah, so there's an upper limit of $1 million on the grant. So a $2 million project. The lower limit's $5,000. As a practical matter, I have not really seen any serious grants that are less than $35,000, and that's pushing it. So most of the ones that we're helping people with are in the low hundreds of thousands, 100,000, a couple 100,000. But if you have a $50,000 project, that's doable too, especially with the tag now where you can get some help instead of having to try to figure it out yourself. Was that helpful to answer your question? So the other thing I need to say about REAP grants is that they are focused on economically distressed areas. That's by census tract. A lot of Waterville is, some of it is not. So it can be a little spotty, but, if you think you're interested in regrant, I've got business cards, I'm happy to leave them with you. But just sort of reach out, there's a map you can go to, I can share the map with you if you want, but, and you just punch in the address, once you got the right map, and it'll tell you whether you're in a distress zone or not. That's a 15% bonus on your scoring, okay? So it turns a C plus into an A minus. It's a big deal. So if you're in one of those distress zones, there's a very good chance that you're gonna get a REAP grant. If you aren't, you need to move quickly. That's my advice. If you aren't, you need to move quickly because they're getting more competitive. 3 months ago, we were beating the bushes trying to talk to people about REAP grants, and we still are. But I'm also getting about 2 calls a week from people inbound about REAP grants in the last month. Okay, so it's heating up. And they're quarterly again, so there's a quarterly application, and that's and it's every calendar quarter through September of 2024. Okay, so we have a little less than a year. After that, the REAP program, as we know it, at this incarnation of it, is done.
The projects have to be installed by the third quarter.
No, you just have to make the application by the third quarter of 2024. I can talk more about that if you want.
Through hypothetical, I don't know if I'm completely, in space with this idea. Our tenants spend around $50,000 a month in energy costs. If I came to you and I said, I want to put up an array, pay for their energy costs, could I get a REAP grant as long as I put my array in a census tract that's to pay for their basically?
So, the first thing I should have said, or a thing I should have said first was that this is for business use, not for residential use. So even if you're a business running multifamily residential, a REAP grant is not going to help you. If you've got something that's some of both, like a mixed use facility, it can help you proportionately. So 20% electricity is going to commercial and 80% going to residential, the REAP grant will pay for 20%, half of 20%. Do you have commercial tenants or residential tenants?
Not enough commercial.
Not enough commercial matter. Yeah. Yeah, right now, there's not a great multifamily residential solution. There's a program which I'm not very familiar with because we don't focus on residential very much. 400 something. Sorry, I can't remember it. I'd be happy to give you a card. I get connected with my colleague Brian, who couldn't be here tonight, but he's much more tuned into that than I am. That's really more for new construction, I think. I don't think it's for, energy for existing.
Will it be applicable for gas fired heat pumps?
It would if you're replacing anything else with them.
That's which we would do.
Yeah. Yeah, what you have to do is sort of show the reduction in BTUs and then monetize that. You don't have to do it yourself, but what has to be done is show the reduction in BTUs. So energy savings is what's going to be the determinant.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's REAP grants, and I'll answer more questions about those. That's just the first step, okay? So it gets better. If you don't get a REAP grant, or if you do get a REAP grant, you still get the federal tax credit. Okay? The federal tax credit applies, it's not competitive. It is 30% for every business and every person at home. If you're a not-for-profit, you don't get a tax credit because you don't pay taxes, but you can now get a direct payment of the same amount. Okay? So just about everybody at home or at work can get access to this tax credit / direct payment money. It's 30% for essentially anybody in the whole country. If you're in a low income zone, then it's 40%. It's not the same thing as a rate distress zone, but as you can imagine, there's some overlap, and it's a different map, but it's similar. Usually if you're in a distress zone, you're in a low income zone anyway. I'm not a tax expert, so this is not tax advice. There's a divergence of opinion that I'm hearing from tax experts about whether if you get a REAP grant, and then you want a tax credit on top of that, whether you can apply the tax credit to the whole project cost or the whole project cost less the REAP grant. You can talk to your tax expert about that. But even if you get a REAP grant and you aren't aggressive about it, and you're only in a 30% tax credit, and that's half, 30% on half of it, so you're still at 50 plus 15, so you're 65%. And then lastly, as for part of the tax credit for your business, you can also take accelerated depreciation, which is a little more complicated. And now I'm really not a tax expert. In our experience, it's coming out in around 10% of the project cost for many of our clients. So that's an additional 10%.
Is that over how many years? Is that over usually it's 5
First
years?
year,
You can take 10% for, it's like an ITC then.
yes, it is. Now it's changing. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Again, I'm not a tax expert, you can tell. So if you haven't taken your maker's depreciation, take it all in the first year. If you have, it's 80% in the first year and 20% over 5 years. And so it's close, but it's kind of weird that way. So 80% in the first year, and then 20% over 5. That starts to ratchet down each year as we move toward 2030. And I apologize, I can't remember the schedule. I can get it for you if you want. It's better now than it's going to be in the future. And it's still quite good next year. So you got those 3 levers to pull. And what I usually say is, this is as pitchy as I'll get. If we can be of help for you to run your electric bill through our software and start to model these for you, so we can do that. And even though we're not giving tax advice, we'll give you estimates for this is what we commonly see for the tax credit, for the depreciation amount, all that.
If a business is applying, but they're a lessee, they're a tenant on a site, they don't own it outright, can they go after these grants or what, either option with an access agreement, or do they have to have sign off? Or would the owner of the site need to be one applying?
That's a great question. Realistically, if you have a long-term lease, then you can be the applicant and get the REAP grant. You need to show that you're going to be using the energy for preferably the lifetime of the asset, which is usually 20 years. 10 probably will get you some traction. We're talking with people in business parks now who we're kind of hashing through that right now. If you can get the owner of the owner interested, that's obviously where you want to be.
Yeah. So,
I can't tell you that I have any experience with that, but probably. I'm no tax expert, but your tax credit, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm sure you can get the tax credit. I don't know whether it should be your business or your house. I don't think you can get a REAP grant. It's probably not a big enough project if it's a home office.
Question. In the state of Maine, can you offset your energy use? If you have solar, can you use it yourself, or you have to sell it back for the utility and then buy it back from the utility?
Okay, so in the state of Maine, what you use in real time, so you have an electric meter, what you use in real time just doesn't show up on that electric meter. So
You back and forth.
so you get the full sort of value of that. That's right. But if you're overproducing and putting it onto the grid, then you get a credit. And that credit right now is actually a little bit more than you're gonna pay when you take it back off. So it's actually slightly, the credit's about 22 cents. The cost of energy is about 16 or 17, or maybe less. So it gets a little complicated, but that's the quick answer. You can also, in Maine, you can also do what's called, I'm sorry, so I try not to speak in utility talk. But these two things, if you're asking a question, you're gonna hear these terms again. So what we just described as net metering, where you get to net it out and then get it back later. You can also do what's called remote net metering. So you at your storage facility that has a big roof and not much use, and your office building a mile away, or 20 miles away, as long as it's in the same utility, you can put your solar, for example, on the roof at your storage facility and net it out against your other building over here. That's interesting. Yeah, I'll stop
What
there.
if your business wanted to have a microgrid and be completely energy independent? How would that calculation work?
Well, if they're off the grid, there's nothing going on to the grid, so there's nothing to get a credit for. So you're gonna apply for your REAP grant, I guess, you're gonna get your tax credit, you're really doing a microgrid. Coming off the grid like that, there's probably other pools of money you can get to, which I could admit I'm not an expert in because not many small businesses are interested in doing it. But there you're making your money, there are very few microgrids that are actually off the grid. So even the ones that can island like that, usually are grid tied. So they can sell to the grid if it's advantageous, so that if the stuff hits the fan, they still have electricity or whatever it is. But microgrids are new and interesting and really wild and exciting. Yeah.
Fleet transition, is it any of this can be used, like, so let's say you have a bunch of like vehicles that are going for.
Yeah.
I just go back to the normal.
Yeah, great question. The quick answer is no. Really is not made for, it doesn't really help with transportation. It's mostly.
A business that wants to deploy software in the facilities to manage energy consumption.
Think about that for a second. That's a great question. So control systems are eligible for these things, for REAP and for your tax credits. So the answer is probably, if it's pure software, I'm not sure I've tried that, but that would probably pass muster as a control system. Certainly worth looking at. Yes.
Curious, we've already spent a bunch of money upgrading our energy consumption, and we proactively or reactively.
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. And you can tell from my tone of voice. And the answer is yes, you can. No. Yeah, insulation and window upgrades would qualify. So if you're thinking about a project, what you need to do is apply for the REAP grant before you spend any or much money on the project. Okay, so once we apply for the grant, that application goes in, then you can start paying as much money as you want and it's reimbursable. The tax credit cares about the year that you did it in. So if you did stuff in 2020, where are we now? Yeah. I'm guessing you've already filed your, I don't know if you can amend your tax return for 2022 or you probably could.
Most of them are done this year.
Okay, so the tax credit, you definitely wanna, get with your tax expert about that. But yeah, save those receipts, absolutely.
I have a question, because like on the, when you were answering the question about having a lease, if, so we have a building, if we did it as the owner of the building, but for energy that's, like, let's say we put solar panels on the roof, and then the energy is used by our tenant, I mean, how are we saving money? Like, that's not electric, but I would still wanna do that, and how does that?
Yes, it's their electric bill, they pay CMP,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So, it's really interesting, and we're working on, it's really just a business model thing. So what we're trying to get commercial property owners to do is basically to do that. And then through this remote net metering that we were talking about, you sort of allocate that production to your tenant. Okay, so it's offsetting their bill, then then they have to pay you for what you're providing them. But that's just sort of a contract that doesn't have anything to do with the regulators or anything like that. It's whatever you agree to with them is how that works. Does that make sense? At least in theory. I'd love to talk with you more about it because we're actually looking for people to do that. Because it's a really, especially in Maine, it's a good way to make money as a landlord and reduce your tenants' bills and get clean energy.
You have to supply that energy as part of the rent, or you can have separate meters for each apartment.
So what I was describing, there's lots of ways you could do it. What I was just describing was the situation where each of the accounts is metered by the utility. Okay, so the tenants each have their own metered account with CMP. So in that case, I'm not sure I'm answering your question. In that case, you would be allocating to each of their meters from your solar output.
So in other words, if you're getting, something back from CNP to sell it to them, your solar output, basically, you're allocating it to each of the different, apartments?
That's right. You're telling CMP, take 10% of this and put it to that account. Take 21% of this and put it to that account. And then, yeah, and so that's what they do.
Just think, it's great if you're altruistic, but if why would you do that?
Well, because then you go to the tenant and say, I'm gonna include this in your rent. Or, we know what, we can see from what CMP's allocation is, how much kilowatt hours you're getting, so you're gonna pay me a certain amount for it.
You can be the energy company for your
You can be the energy company. Well, I'm not gonna use that language because, but you can, yeah.
broker. What does it mean to own? So we manage other meters. How do you define ownership of the meter? Which is a really gray area that we got into, because when we manage for other people, we would love to be the energy company for the tenants. However, we don't know what it means to own the meter. Like, if we put the meter in our name as the landlord, but we don't own the underlying asset, I'm getting into really weird areas.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
No, CMP still owns, let me think for a second. Well, if you're the landlord paying the bill, I mean, that's easy. Right now you don't have to do this fancy stuff. You just cut your bill. So that's another way to do it, is to stop charging your tenant or tell your tenants, you don't pay the electric bill, I pay the electric bill. And now you've cut your own electric bill, you just offsetting your own electric bill. So that's also a very easy way to do it. You just move the electric bill into your name or have the electric bill in your name, your company's name.
Got it.
I thought you were asking me a submarine question.
Well, it is a little different. So I think the question is, if you're not the technical owner of the building, we manage the property for them, for an owner. Can I net meter back to them from my array and sell it to the tenant?
Sure, if you own the array. Yeah, you don't have to own the building to own the solar output.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll make your card.
yeah.
But I would think then you'd have to pay rent for the tenant.
Well, you would, yeah, but, you know, the deal you have with the landlord is where you gotta figure that out, you know.
That's tricky.
You've got a solar array on the roof that needs to stay there for 25 years while it produces energy, so.
My array,
One sign a 25-year deal with you, like, yeah.
my array could be in a field 20 miles away, right?
That's true, it could. Yeah, it certainly could. Yeah.
What's your feeling, will we get to a place in Maine where we'll be able to take like a European model of selling excess energy in our communities?
That's my feeling.
You probably know the European model better than I do. And I'm not sure what you mean. I'm not sure what you mean by
The Airbnb of electricity, do we make our own and sell our own and circumvent?
well, the stuff we just were talking about is sort of pushing the boundaries. You know, the rules allow for that, but if it starts happening on a much larger scale, you know, I would expect pushback from the utilities. That doesn't mean they're gonna get their way. But, so my feeling is yes, we are gonna get there. But it's gonna be a tough path.
It's made out on the forefront basically of that type of, because based on my experience, I haven't done it in a long time, but most states, you had to sell back to the utility, anything that you produced. If you had a cogeneration unit, you had to sell them the power and then you had to buy it back.
So that used to be prevalent, and it's actually much less prevalent in a lot of the country now.
Okay.
So New England, not all of New England, excepting Vermont, New England is mostly the new way now. I'm not saying Vermont's not, but I'm not sure about Vermont because it's still.
Is that just because storage technology's gotten better? And then disabled or?
No, it's because, why is it because this is really a what do I think question. No, it's because the regulators are ultimately subject to political forces, and political forces want more. Okay, utilities in Maine are, despite yesterday's vote, are still widely reviled. I think Maine does lead the country in how much people don't like their utility. But you got a lot of contenders. And there are, yeah, California is up there. In fact, there are actually only a handful of states and a handful of utilities that actually have good, what do they call those? What was what was that?
Customer satisfaction.
Yes, exactly. Well,
Net promoter score.
net promoter score. Thanks. Nobody cares about that anymore, but 5 years ago, you couldn't talk about any of that. Yeah, so utilities have terrible NPSs and probably terrible customer service rankings. There's a few that don't, but I mean, overwhelmingly they do. So that's sort of the discussion answer to your question. Is a great question. Is are we ever going to get there and why? And the answer is ultimately it's going to be power to the people. But the utilities they're gonna fight it, and they're big and they're strong, and they'll spend $40 million. I'm not saying that Pine Tree Power would have fixed that. Like there were a lot of issues with that. You know, there was sort of it created a whole new set of problems. You know, I don't know. It was sort of there's clearly a problem. Okay, there's clearly a problem with Maine utilities and 100,000 bills that are wrong. Like That's terrible. But, you know, it would have been the course for years, and it would have probably, this is an opinion, okay? I think it would slow it actually down the transition rather than sped it up. Although nationwide, that is a way to get to these kinds of solutions. But I see, this is my last opinion on this, and then we'll change the subject. But utilities more and more are making their money by moving power, not generating it. So when you're moving it from your solar panels in the field to the tenants that you own over here, you're gonna pay the utility to move it for you, and T&D, yeah. So we're gonna probably move that direction, where if you're moving it, you're paying them, and if you're not moving it, you're not paying them. And it's appropriate. That's an opinion, but I mean, that's a structure that has worked well in other industries like natural gas. It's actually worked quite well.
We've been going for a while, so I'm happy to keep going, but I know it's.
I think we'll reserve time for one more question, and then we'll have Malcolm's contact information for anyone that has any additional questions and queries.
Your software, can you maybe just tell us a little bit about your software?
Sure, I'm not a plant, but that's a very nice you asked. So again, we had to build our software so that with a single utility bill, and the data on that bill, we knew enough about you as a customer that we could then use the software, we could then model all of these different solutions that we've been talking about and how much they would impact your bill. So that's what the software is. So it has to take into account all these incentives we talked about, and a whole bunch of others. And then it has to understand how your bill gets generated and model that. And what it does is, excuse me, so that's what it does. It sort of models all these different possibilities and then says, well, you'll save in this range of this one, and this range of this one. It pulls the best ones to the top. So what you get out the other side is what we call a scorecard, an energy scorecard, which sort of ranks your solutions and the range of savings you're likely to see. Now, of course, that changes over time, right? Because incentives and everything change. So, but that's okay. Just give us a new bill, you got it through again. And that's the whole point, is making this whole thing iterative and simple. The software is very complicated because it's really hard to, if you've ever looked at these incentives that are out there, they're written in legalese, and the person reading them can't understand it. And now you have to turn that into data that you can use in a computer. And yes, AI can help with that, but anyway, it's really hard to come up with those data structures. So that was really difficult. I've been building energy software for about 3 decades, and it took all that knowledge that I had to sort of figure out how we can do that. But that's what it does. And then interestingly, once you start sort of getting into the competitive process, getting quotes for heat pumps or quote for solar, that's not really an automated process, simply because the industry doesn't work that way. If you've gotten solar quotes, it's just pieces of paper, PDFs going back and forth. That's the reality that we live with.
On the money side, how do you make money?
Yeah, so we get a commission from the provider of the solution. So whoever installs the heat pumps or the solar panels or whatever pays us. The customer never pays us.
You get paid by the utility?
We get paid by the solar company or the HVAC company, not the utility, but by the clean energy provider. So if you wanted a solar project and you said, help us, you said, I don't know what to do with my facility, and you ran it through the scorecard, it came back, and the solar energy rooftop was the top of the list. We bring you a couple of competitive bids from solar energy providers in the winter who got your business would pay us a fee. And we're upfront about that. It's not a secret. It's usually around 5% of the project cost. But we're sitting on the customer side of the table, and so providing them with a lot of value. So we don't usually get much pushback on that. And the providers view us as sort of lead generation. Right? So they're very happy with that because their cost of sale is way more than 5%. And by the time that we bring them a project, it's been through our software, we've had multiple conversations with the customer, we really vetted the project, so if we take it out to bid, it's very likely that the project's gonna get done, so it's sort of a win-win-win, except for the utility then. That's okay. Well, those bottom.
Could a residential customer just pay you for the service?
I mean, so far, a residential customer will just do it because we're nice. You know, but if we got a bunch of volume, I have to come up with a business model, and I don't know what it is. It's part of the reason we're not residential yet. Yeah, that's kind of the concern. So the last piece of wonderful fun I have for you is that any of you at home that have not signed up for community solar should seriously consider it. It is a 20% savings off of your residential bill. It actually comes out to more like 18.5 because some of the charges aren't. But anyway, and all you're doing is telling the utility to get your energy from some solar farm that somebody's already built or almost has built, and source your energy there. And for doing that, you get a 20%. You get 20% savings. Okay, so you make 20% for that, less for that electricity than you would for regular electricity. That's the case if you're buying from Central Maine Power. If you're buying competitively, it gets a little bit more complicated. It might not be the full 20%. But if you just have an energy bill at home, like, please reach out. I'll point you in the right direction. I'll help you if I can. But I mean, it's, you know, these times of rising energy prices, like 20%.
What's the purpose of an incentive like that? Like, why is that?
To get more clean energy in Maine. It's not just the main
It's
thing.
already coming off the grid, and is it just the make the allocations that somebody can argue, look, the market wants this, or?
Well, clean energy has a value that exceeds, in the eyes of the politicians who created the law to enable community solar, clean energy has a value that exceeds the value of dirty energy. And so that value needs to be provided in some way. So that's how it's done. It's I think, you know, 20 years from now, when we do have a more transparent way of doing this, people are gonna say, this is what I had to do when I started doing it, you know, and it is a little bit convoluted, but you sort of don't have to worry about all that because that's all done for you. So you get the 20% savings, and if you don't like it, you can get out of it. There's no penalty. So it's sort of a no risk thing. It's just an online sign up. It takes about 10 minutes. You have to pay. You have to auto pay it. Okay, so that is one catch. And then the other catch is that you get you're getting a second bill now. So your CMP bill is going to be really small, but it's still going to be there and it still has to get paid. And then you're going to get the community solar bill, and the community solar company is going to be most of your bill. And that's where your 20% is. You can get a credit for 100%, and you're going to pay them 80% and there's your 20%. Sounds good. So anyway, you got to pay 2 bills. So that's the downside. Hey, you guys have been awesome. Thank you so much. I learned a lot tonight. These were really good. Well, these cards up here is what you lost.
Thank you, Malcolm, for your presentation. It's been great having you this
Thank
evening.
you.
And thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. This conversation has been recorded and will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel. This conversation has been sponsored by the Harold Alpine Institute for Business Innovation at Tufts College, Valley Beverage, and Brooks Co-working and Innovation Space. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thank you.